For centuries, Grimsby and Hull were home to Britain's largest distant water fishing fleet. Night after night, fully manned trawlers set out for Iceland.
In 1840, Hull and Grimsby perhaps had a dozen very small fishing vessels between them. By 1870, you could argue that they were the leading fishing ports in the world. During the 1880s, Hull and Grimsby adopted steam and began building purpose-built steam vessels. And after 1891 to be probably precise, these fishing vessels the trawlers started to visit Iceland.
The only thing we could ever see to improve our parents' life, our life, was to go to sea, to be a fisherman. It was an ambition, I think, because we watched our fathers, we watched the neighbours, we watched everyone. And the only money what was in Hull at that time was the fisherman's money. They were the people who had just that extra bit of money.
When a fisherman come home, he was the smartest man in the world. He had his suit and he felt $1 million. Apart from the money, he felt $1 million. They designed their own suits, their own shoes, and had them made in shops. They created square-toed shoes so they could stand nearer the bar.
Sometimes you settled in debt. When I first started fishing, and you used to look at your hands and think, good God, they'll never heal up. And then within 36 hours you was back to sea again.
Well, the responsibility to the skipper was huge, really. He was given a ship, 20 men, will make it pay. There was always somebody there waiting for your job. And so therefore you used to put your men through hell and air. I don't know how, I couldn't do it now. I couldn't put men through what I used to have to put men through. I often wake up at night with bad dreams. And I do, seriously. The weather that we use for fishing. And I'd say, thank God I never lost a man, and I never maimed a man. But I was very, very fortunate.
Until 1952, international agreements allowed British trawlers within 3 miles of the Icelandic coast.
Við veit alveg upp á 30 míl og helst fyrir innan hana. Sko 3 mílur, það er tæpið 6 kilometrar. En svo var þetta líka með Bretana og íslensku skipstjórnum enda líka. Þetta var svona íþrótt að fiska fyrir innan. Það þótti engin maður með mönnum að gæti það til að fara inn fyrir og fá svolítið betri fisk.
When there was no fish on the outside, I had to go straying inside. You know, it wasn't out of badness, it was more for what we call a crack. You know, if you thought there was a bit more fish inside, well, you go for it. Just have a little game of cat and mouse with the Icelandic Coast Guard. They used to love me, I used to love them.
On the 15th of May 1952, Iceland extended the limit to 4 miles. Flags were lowered to half-mast in all British fishing ports. The Grimsby Evening Telegraph dubbed it Black Thursday, the darkest day the British fishing industry had ever known.
Extending from 3 miles to 4 miles was not a problem, not from a fisherman's point of view. It was the point-to-point that they introduced, which didn't just cut out hundreds of square miles of fishing ground inside places like Breedy Bay and Faxoy and whatever, but it really just denied you any shelter. You couldn't get into those places to shelter from the weather. So when the weather really got atrocious, you had to stop fishing, or force the elements and force your men to work through extreme conditions. And that's unfortunately what happened.
Man til eins og þá komum við þarna í vitleysu veðri Vestfjörðunum og sáum hann fullt af togurum út af Súgandafirði. Þá komum við einum sem að toga. og hann játaði strax og hann sagði að það var bara spurt hafsögumanninn, hann hafði verið á Ísafirði og spurt hafsögumanninn hvaða hásekt væri fyrir landsliðsbrot og þegar hann fekk vita hvað það var hásekt þá tók hann sér.
Well, in the earlier, the first time I was fined about £2,000. Second time about £4,000. The third kept going up as the years went by, you know. The racing, especially if Iceland wanted a new Coast Guard vessel.
Ég fannst alltaf skemmtilegt að vera með Bretum, þeir börðust eins og ljón til þess að byrja með, en þeir sáu það sko að leikurinn var tapaður, og það bara viðkynnslega.
All your trawlers stop fishing, otherwise I have to report your action and you may later be prosecuted for this unlawful act.
Og aðra þjóðir eins og til dæmis belgar og sérstaklega belgar, þeir voru svo meiri að þeir fóru að gráta. Það var það versta sem ég komist í mínu sjómennsku, það verði grátandi skipstjóri hjá sér og hóta honum 20.000 og stórum sektum.
But I've got to be honest and say, in every court case I was involved in, I never ever knew one of the Icelandic Coast Guard officers to tell a lie. They always stated the facts as there was. I wanted to congratulate them on their navigation and the chart work, but I daren't. Else I'd be dropping myself in it. But they were very fair in that respect.
The Icelanders continued to worry about overfishing. In 1958, fishery limits were discussed at the first Law of the Sea conference in Geneva. Pressure from the small nations to set a 12-mile limit was resisted, and no compromise could be found. On the 1st of September, the Icelandic government extended their limit to 12 miles.
When the Icelanders moved to 12 miles, that provoked a very strong reaction in the distant water trawling trade. Basically because they wished and they realised that this was a threat to their livelihood.
For Britain, the 12-mile limit was a violation of international law. The Royal Navy was sent to protect the distant water fishing fleet.
Breska ríkisstjórnir senda flotann á vettvang og beita sér jafn ákveðið hart í þessum málum allt til loka af þremur meginástæðum. Það prinsip að ræða fyrir Breta og Bretar eru mjög prinsipfastir menn. Og Bretar sögðu Íslendingar fara ekki að lögum og þeir ógna hagsmunum sem við höfum og höfum lengi haft á úthafinu og þar af leiðandi bregðumst við með þessum hætti. Í öðru lagi var tilfinningalegar ástæður að ræða sem áttu rætur í því að togara sjómennirnir í Hull og Grimsby áttu ákveðna innstæðu, eða svo má segja, þetta áttu nú við framan af frekar en í síðari deilunum sem laut að framistöðu þeirra í síðari heimsstyrjöldinni og henni hafði ekki verið gleymt og síðan var auðvitað verulega staðbundna hagsmuni að ræða í Hull og Grimsby, einnig Fleetwood framan af.
Það var mikill hugur í vaskismönnum að reyna að standa sig sem best og reyna að sýna Bretunum að það að herskipahættur voru ekki neitt.
Það var líka sko með 12 mílurnar, það voru önnur manngerð við stjórn á breskskípunum heldur en 50 Þá það eins og Andersson sko og yfirmennir á þeim skipum, þeir voru oft með hótuna að bara, við voru alltaf með byssuna á lofti sko, tók von á þeim og ég bara ef við gerum þetta og bara sekkið þeir. Og þannig að þeir fóru með þetta huga fór hingað, en þeir bara máttu ekki þetta með hérna. En þeir voru alltaf með þetta kjæft í morgun það, bara sökkaður og gerir eitthvað.
Commander Eiríkur Kristofferson of the Icelandic flagship Thor attempted to arrest the trawler Northern Foam, found fishing inside the new 12-mile limit.
Þetta ágæta skip Northern Foam þvælast þarna í lögbrottum og Eiríkur sendi okkur borð í hann til að taka hann bara á venjulegan hátt og við vorum hann borð í honum að vera þar einhverja smástund, klukkutíma svoleiðis þegar freigátan Eastbourne kom. og þeir sendu stóran vélbát með fullan af mönnum með hallækni og herskipið sagði sínum mönnum að fara með okkur borð í Þór en Eiríkur bara neitaði að taka við okkur og svíkti burtu.
In these somewhat muddled circumstances, the Coast Guards unexpectedly found themselves guests of the Royal Navy.
Við vorum hérna gestir hennar hátignar borð í Ísborg og við bjuggum bara með þeim eins og þeir. En við fengum ekki ránskammtinn, Íslendingarnir. Það var talið þarna af hæstaráðinu að við gætum orðið of stríðsglaðir ef við fengjum ránið. Nú, það var einn Íri þarna borð. Hann var háseti. Og hann var dálítið vel hliðhollur okkur, vildi að við tækjum skipið og sigldum í höfn á Íslandi. Og ég segi það ekki að það máli hafi ekki verið rætt.
After 11 days being kept aboard HMS Eastbourne, Commander Anderson offered the Coast Guards a boat so they could row ashore to the American NATO base at Keflavik.
Og einu vandamálin sem voru eftir það að ameríska herstjórnin var eitthvað óánægð með það að varnarlið á Keflavíkurflugvelli vissi ekki af því að kom heilt herskip næstum því upp að brink í Keflavík á þessari viss af því.
Unsure of the Royal Navy's orders, the ill-equipped Icelandic Coast Guard was reluctant to confront the trawlers. Instead, they kept a log of all the boats found fishing inside the 12-mile limit.
We would see the Icelandic gunboat come alongside the trawler, and he would stand with a loud hailer, and he would say, "Skipper, skipper," and we would all wave to him and get out of it and all this, you see. And then, of course, they would lower a boat with the Icelandic naval officers stood with the oar and a revolver on the hip.
Þegar gerðu nú mótleik ef við grunnum okkur við ætlum að senda bát yfir að stoppa hjá þeim, þá voru búin að búið til spjót og ætlaði að skutla þessi í gummibátana ef við kemum yfir. Og svo voru það með heita gufu sem þeir voru tilbúin að sprauta okkur og þeir höfðu það þannig að þeir gistu bakvort hlýðina á skipinu þannig að við kemum með netum þannig að við komumst ekki borð þeim megin en trollið var stjórnborðsmegin og þá var hann að fara undir vírana og það var gætt verið lífshættur þegar þeir myndi slá úr brökkinni og skella vírarnir niður við skrifmenn í sundur. Þannig að við fórum aldrei þeim með einum borðskipin þannig að það gæti stór hættuleg. Þannig að þeir voru vel undir þetta búnir og þeir ætluðu ekki að fekk okkur borð.
It was more mischievous, I think. We took a lot of it in fun. I don't think we realised the seriousness of it then. To us, it wasn't a serious matter. And that was the way we approached it. We would throw potatoes at the gunboats. You know, that is the way the fishermen viewed it. It was a bit of fun.
In 1961, Britain accepted the now almost universal 12-mile limit. In return, Iceland destroyed their well-kept records, bringing this war of nerves to a close. The 4 years of the first Cod War had seen a total of 37 Royal Navy ships and 7,000 sailors protecting the fishing fleet from the 6 Icelandic gunboats and their 100 coast guards. In 1972, 10 years later, Iceland elected a left-wing government in favour of extending the fishery limit to 50 miles. Britain immediately took the dispute to the International Court of Justice in The Hague, while the trawlers and the Icelandic Coast Guard prepared for a second Cod War.
We have from the beginning said that we don't think the court has jurisdiction in this case, and we have let the court know and the British government and the German government know that we do not think these indications binding for Iceland in any way.
The extension of the fishery limits to 50 miles is not based on our selfish interests, but on our responsibility for rational utilization of fish stocks.
The extension to 50 miles, of course, was greeted with, a great deal of hostility. Again, it was seen that people were pushing out into international waters, the freedom of the sea was being challenged. The whole potential future of vitality of this industry, which so many people relied, was being compromised.
The court meets today to announce its decisions.
The International Court of Justice ruled in Britain's favour. Iceland now had to rely solely on the Coast Guard and their small fleet of gunboats to protect the fishing grounds.
Það var nú viðbúnaður svona í sambandi við var verið að æfa upp göngur í skip og svona farið á námskeið hjá lögreglunni í sambandi við að beita kylfum og þess háttar. Sögðu nú svona húmorastöðnir að það hefði nú ekki verið meiri undirbúningur fyrir útfærslu hjá vélinuna en að setja meiri olíu á skipin og teppaleggja á stjórnstöð.
We're determined to carry on fishing inside the 50-mile limits. We're absolutely determined. And if it does take the same lines as the last Cod War, we had to do so much haven time. They make havens, one on the northwest coast of Iceland, one on the southeast coast. But this haven time does restrict a man's ability to catch fish on his own.
On the 1st of September 1972, the British fishing fleet set sail. In readiness for the Icelandic Coast Guard, the skippers had taken the precaution of painting over the trawlers' names and numbers. They also took pirate flags to hoist on entering the 50-mile limit.
Nokkur skiptir engu máli, við þekktum það alla. Við erum búin að vera innan þessi skip í 20 ára og ef nýtt skip koma þá var það bara sem að setja í safnið og það skiptir okkur engu máli. Ég man ekki eftir hvernig, við hefum bara þekkt Peter Scott, það var ekkert mál.
In the face of British determination to fish the waters, the Icelandic Prime Minister Ólafur Jóhannesson permitted the Coast Guard to use their secret weapon, a trawl wire cutting device that had been developed towards the end of the 12-mile dispute.
Og þetta svona bara eins og slæða sem með hnífum inni. Og ég held ég farið með rétt að þessi hnífar hafi verið teknir úr leghæfingstönnum og síðan þegar þetta kemur á vírana og það verður span, semst það mikið átak á vírunum þegar togurinn dregur trólu eftir sér, mikið viðnám og þá þetta bara svo fyrirstrengur sem fyrir burtu þegar klippuna lenda á vírunum.
All your trawl and stop fishing. Otherwise I have to report your action and...
Right, old Charles, for 106, the anti-boarding device coming up.
Þeir voru alltaf að spila Rúl Britannia þegar þeir þóttust vera í svona jákvæðum málum. Það gekk eitthvað vel hjá þeim. Þá voru við þarna að messa yfir þeim að þeir mætti ekki vera þetta og þeir voru með þetta hefðbundna kjaftaði við okkur og þá var ekki heimilt að klippa.
Hafa strax stoppað grænlhóðnin og öskra bara hjálp og hjálp. Það hýði þarna allir flotinu.
Fyrst voru alveg bara mállausir, undrandi. Þorðust þetta bara fara, þeir skildu þetta ekki. Og það var náttúrulega allt brjálað, allir flotið hann kom hérna Sviklandi og ég held við voru eitthvað 20 og þeir ætlaði bara að keyra okkur niður á staðinu og bara klára dæmi hérna. Gerðu þetta ekki aftur. En það tókst nú ekki.
I think the fishermen and the owners felt that it was an extremely stupid and very dangerous occupation and would almost inevitably lead to loss of life.
Tilfelli var að þetta var skorið djúpt þar langt niður í sjónum og teygjan sem var á víðunum, hún fór bara í sjóin. Þannig að stundum vissum við ekki að við höfum klippt fyrir að við sáum endan að koma upp hjá þeim og þeir vissu ekki heldur.
Well, when it recoils back, if the lads had been stood in the pounds, it would have just, well, it could have killed somebody quite easily. You know, it could cut them in half. It's as bad as that.
Þarna sáum við hvað við gátum gert á þess að beita hefðbundnu vopnum, á þess að Bretar fengi færi á það að skjóta okkur með það, með þá ástæðu að við hefðum byrjað vopnaburð. Þetta var ekki vopnaburð. Þetta var bara heima tilbúið íslenskt amboð og átti ekkert skylt við neinn hernaðartækni.
And it's like a small nation against a big nation. What the hell else can we do? So they thought, well, chuck him lots and we'll lay the trawler owners in the pockets. I didn't go for it at the time, you know what I mean? If I'd have been the Icelanders, I'd done exactly the same, you know. If you don't want somebody on your doorstep, then do something to get them off it.
The video. That's us just Orly. We have shot, and we'll show you the shooting sequences later on in this video. You'll notice on this video we're getting a lot of interference. This is from our very high-powered radar. And we can't turn this radar off, we need it all the time, as you'll understand. The places we fish and the fleets we fish with. But we thought it best to leave it in, and you can understand how it goes in with the story. They're very noisy ships. A lot of electrics, and it's all enclosed in an iron space. So these modern day video recorders pick every little sound, every little noise up. But without these sounds and all these little noises, these videos wouldn't be very lifelike. Now we've just tipped the fish down the factory. That's the second mate, he's just tying a cod line. That's the end of the trawl. Done all the repairs. There's a trawl, she's all laid ready. Ready for when we shoot in. Pull everything forward. I'll say that again. For everything aft. The yellow floats, they keep the mouth of the trawl open. And the large iron bobbins and rubber bobbins, the big round things you will see, they keep the bottom of the mouth of the trawl on the seabed. And the two big iron doors, they keep the mouth of the trawl open. Here we are getting ready to shoot now. That's just a safety line to put across. That's the end of the trawl, the cod ends. That's where the catch finishes up. They're dropped. And using the power of the ship and the sea itself, you can see the trawl is just dragging itself out. There's your rubber and iron bobbins and your floats. The fish you see on deck are stickers. They're caught further up in the trawl. They've just dropped out as we've been hauling. Just making sure the trawl's all square. That's our bosun. That's your trawl away. It's now submerged. It's gone under the water as the trawl. That's the weight of the bobbins. There the cable's away. Well, they're going to connect up to the 2 trawl doors. Connected up and shot away. These keep the mouth of the trawl open when she's towing along the seabed. There's your warp span away. That's heading down to the seabed now. We're now at a factory. We've hauled and we're emptying the trawl down the ramp. Here it is dropping into the pounds aft. From the pounds, drops onto the conveyors. There's a lovely Arctic cod coming down. It runs along. The lads sort it large and small. Now they're putting it through an eddy machine. This is the first stage of processing. Once the heads are off, through a gutting machine, the guts are out, and then it's dropped into these bleeding tanks. These will fill with water, they'll bleed off, and that's where you get your lovely white fillets. That's another heading machine we have too. There are lads in the background there just sorting a large and small cod. If there's a few addicts among it, they'll go in a separate tank to be done later. That's all your offal, the heads, guts, big cats that we don't need, big catfish. They'll just go back over the side to feed the seagulls. And there's more of your cod going into your tanks. We'll see how this is lovely Arctic cod. No, that hasn't been washed. We don't need to put anything in these tanks to move the water. The movement of the ship does that for us. There's a fish, it's going through the filleting machines. There's the fillets coming off. We do land skinned or skinless. Depends on what the market requires. As the fillets go through, I say skinned or unskinned. All conveyors. Runs along. We have a bench there with the lads. They've got a little razor sharp knives. They're just trimming the fillets. These machines can't do everything perfect. You always need the man at the end with his little knife to trim and make a nice fillet for the markets. Then it's along to the packers. These lads are packing 15-pound boxes. As you can see, they're doing the fillets. Put it in a box. Put it into a trader and tray onto a shelf. These are all shatter packs. That's your freezers. Within 2 hours of this fish being caught, It's frozen. And down the fish room ready for the markets. Just one of our boxes we use. There's a freezer man, he's loading the freezers up. Two boxes to a tray. There's a man. He's taking the boxes out of the freezers. They're frozen solid now. And 3 boxes are packed into a master carton. It's banded. Down the conveyor into the freezers. I say they're from Bincourt. The process has taken 2 hours. From swimming in the sea to frozen down the freezers, 2 hours. We're now down in the freezer compartment. You can see the master cartons coming down. That's the lads taking them off the belt and stowing them. There you can see the masters at the back.
Putting that gear back together again took 18 hours solid slog for all hands to rebuild that gear and put it back on the deck. And to their mind, it was 18 hours for nothing. They weren't getting paid for putting that gear back because it wasn't catching many fish. That was heartbreaking. Particularly after, by the time we got the gear rigged up and shot away, the fish had probably moved anyway.
In addition to the ongoing Cod War, British fishing was dealt another blow when the country opted to join the common market. The fisheries policy opened up Britain's own grounds to their new European partners.
When Britain entered the common market, as it then was, the European Economic Community, in 1972, nobody bothered about fishing particularly because it was assumed that we would catch fish in Iceland. Therefore, when they insisted that a condition of membership was that fish should be treated as a common resource to which everybody should have equal access, it didn't particularly matter to the big owners, it mattered to the inshore fishermen. Then suddenly people woke up with horror, what's going to happen?
Off Iceland, the Coast Guard's wire cutters were proving highly effective. By January 1973, the trawler skippers had had enough and threatened to leave the fishing grounds if they didn't get protection. But this time they did not want the Royal Navy to specify where they could go. Instead, they wanted the Royal Navy to follow them.
I would think that we've no choice whatsoever what we do about it. We can't fish here, it's impossible. We therefore have to leave, there is no choice of it.
Þeir sigldu út megnið af flotanum og hótuðu því að þeir kæmu bara heim ef þessu héldi áfram og þeir fengi ekki meira aðstoð frá enskum stjórnvöldum. Vildu nú herskip, en fengu það ekki það sinn, en fengu það dráttarbáta.
The Lloydsman was a very powerfully built but slow ship. She, just as the gunboats were much tougher and had a thicker skin than we did, Lloydsman was tougher and had a much thicker skin than they did. And I don't think any of the gunboats thought that Lloydsman was a joke.
And they come out with these oil rig ships, these tugs. I said, what do you think they're going to do? In bad weather, Iceland. I said, what's speed going to do? 10 knots. I said, you must be crackers. I said, 10 knots. I said, do you realise what the Icelandic gunboats seem like? How long was it there? These tugs and whatever that was the secret weapon. It was the best laugh of all, I think.
Icelandic Coast Guard, you are requested to hold your gear.
Dissatisfied with this ineffective protection from the wire cutters, the trawlers again threatened to leave the fishing grounds in May 1973. This would have been tantamount to surrender, so the Royal Navy returned to support the tugboats.
Now, for the first time, we have got unanimous support of the industry that the Navy should go in. This was one of the purposes of my visit to Hull on Thursday, to try and find out from the industry whether they would support, because I've always felt that unless the Navy had the full support of the industry, it would be very difficult for them to help, even if they did go in.
The Icelandic did cut my toe ups 3 times to my knowledge. The only one time it was in a stern fisher, a fresh fisher, but she was a stern fisher, the CS Forester. 2 the British Coast Guard vessels. One had a liaison officer on board, a friend of mine, Mick Osborne. And I called Mick Osborne, HMS, I forget the name of the ship. I said, Mick, we have found a few fish marks. We're going to shoot our troll. Can we have some protection? He said, yes. I speak to the captain. He shot the gear. And Mick Osborne, my friend, said to me, right, if we arrange with the captain, one British gunboat will be tight on your port quarter, the other one will be tight on your starboard quarter. The Agar cannot get between us. He said, we guarantee. So we are fishing away. And I looked aft and I thought, the British gunboats are very close. You wouldn't get a cigarette paper between the 2 British gunboats. And the Agar was circling ahead of us. He gave us the official warning. Well, I wanted to answer him and laugh, but I thought, no, that's too disrespectful. So I didn't say anything. And he started coming on my port side at full speed. I thought, cracky, there's got to be a collision. And as our gunboat, HMS, forget his name, I'll call him HMS Useless, and he was tight on our port quarter. And as the Agar got down our port side, the British gunboat backed away to port. And he just circled us in one motion and bang, the explosive cutter went. And it chopped our port warp. So I called the captain of HMS Useless up. I said, what's this guarantee you'll give me? He said, we are telling the truth. There would have been a collision. I said, yes, I know that. And the captain of the Odin knows that. I said, it's only you. I said, you should have stood your ground. You would have squeezed him in between me and you. Well, he said, we can't do that without permission from Whitehall. Oh.
Iceland's argument was for the conservation of the cod stocks, while Britain claimed historical rights to fish the waters.
Þegar að breskir stjórnmálamenn eða reyndar fjölmiðlar voru að reyna að leita að glufur í okkar málflutningi, reyna að finna mismunandi viðhorf innan ríkisstjórnarinnar eða önnur viðhorf í alþingi eða hjá alþingismönnum heldur en hjá ríkisstjórninni eða hjá almenningi, þá tókst það aldrei. Íslendingar voru innilega sammála þetta stóra hagsmunamál sitt.
We believed that we had these rights for so long and that we were entitled to have them. And there was no sound explanation given as to why we shouldn't have. Now, we knew about the internal political situation in Iceland, which was you've got a communist minister there who was trying to run the show. And he wanted to get rid of everybody in every respect. He wanted to get out of NATO. We knew that, but that wasn't our view.
We are very few, we Icelanders, and we have fought for a long time for our independence in Iceland. And we have learned it, that the basis for our independence is economic independence. Therefore, we all realize that to prevent the fish stocks around Iceland from overfishing, that means nearly to say everything for us in Iceland regarding our independence.
Don't make me laugh. There's no problem for conservation there.
Wasn't there?
and all the fishermen knew it.
On the 16th of October 1973, Britain and Iceland opened negotiations. The Cod War had become a millstone around the Tory government's neck. Ólafur Jóhannesson, the Icelandic Prime Minister, flew to London.
Well, it goes without saying that I would not have come if I had not any hope. It is my convictions, it has been my convictions, that is best for both parties to come to some peaceful and interim arrangements.
And he wanted us to get out. Well, in the end we reached an agreement about the ones which we would continue to occupy and the number of boats we would have. And that if any boat cheated, then it would rightly be withdrawn. That was accepted by both sides. We went on fishing, and I don't think the Icelandic government always realized it, but we got a very satisfactory result.
No factory trawlers were allowed inside the 50-mile limit, and the total catch of the British fleet was limited to a quota of 130,000 tons. Certain fishing grounds were strictly off-limits. But shortly afterwards, the Icelandic Coast Guard caught the Hull skipper Richard Taylor on the forbidden grounds. A notorious character, he had already served 2 sentences.
It's the most bizarre capture I think the Icelandic Coast Guard will ever get. About 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, right, you can take over now to the mates. And I showed him the chart. I showed him the tow that we were making. I said, here's the limit line. You know your positions of the backland on the radar and all that. And I left it to him. I was very tired. I said, call me at 7 o'clock in the morning. I said, regardless of what fish we get, we're going home. Because we're nearly full anyway.
Ja, það var þegar samkomulega hafði af sér staði, það var gengið í gildi fyrir við 50 mínunar. Þá erum við á eftirlitsferð í kringum Hvalsbak og komum þarna að togara og sem reyndist síðan CS Forrester.
About 5 o'clock in the morning, he come shaking me, skipper, skipper. So what time is it? He said 5 o'clock. I said, another 2 hours. I said, come on. He said, he said, the gunboat wants us to haul our gear. How far are we off the backland? He said, 31 miles. I said, crikey. I knew then. I said, you need to be 33 miles off this particular piece of background. That's that. So I come on the bridge. Gunboat's tight alongside of us. With my past record, I thought this time I'm going to get 5 years. Well, he can sink the ship if he wants to, as long as the crew's okay. Well, that's so I started steaming to the Faroese limits.
Og þá nú Marsin búið að reyna að koma vitinu fyrir Taylor, bæði útgerðin í Englandi, Hása sem þá var eftirlitsskip Breta á Íslandsmiðum.
It was firing blank shells at us, and we carried on and we got very close to the Faroese limits. And the Icelandic captain called me up and said, I've just been in touch with Reykjavik. I've got to stop you at all costs. The first shell that hit us, the ship shuddered. It shuddered. And I looked down and thought, crikey, means business, this guy. But there can't be very good shots aboard that ship.
En svo skipti ég bara skiptu og setti þriðastiginu sem reyndar hafði nú aldrei snert á fallbyssu til að skjóta og það var bara 100% nýting. Það skaut 2 skotum og annað fór í gegnum togara og hitt fór þarna eins og ég segi inn í rafvélarnum og stoppaði.
And they arrested me then. So I said, well, you'll be going out to Little Rome again, your old holiday camp.
Iceland discovered that the fish stocks were shrinking further. On the 15th of October 1975, the limits were once again extended, this time to 200 miles.
I did appreciate that the 50-mile limit was more difficult for them to police, But when they declared 200 miles, completely off the continental shelf, it just didn't seem right. What right are they to claim a whole continental shelf to themselves?
Síðasta þorskastríðið á Íslandi heyja Bretar ekki til þess að tryggja hagsmuni sína inn í framtíðina. Þeir heyja það til þess að kaupa sér tíma fyrir hönd fólksins í Hull og Grimsby, einkum og sér í lagi að semja upp á nýtt sjávarútvegsstefnu Evrópubandalagsins. Það gekk síðan ekki.
We gave away the right to our own waters in Europe and at the same time didn't provide for the continuation in Iceland. And when Iceland, I think, inevitably extended its waters to 12 to 50 to 200, and 200 was the last one, then suddenly people woke up with horror. What's going to happen?
And it was sheer hypocrisy on the one hand to be demanding the extension of 200 miles of continental shelf so Britain could get oil, but then deny the same facility to Iceland. And it seemed to me what you've got to do there is not sending gunboats, but send in a bit of intelligence and a bit of common sense and find agreement.
By the end of November, the Royal Navy was once again patrolling the fishing grounds, while the politicians talked. It was clear that this time the stakes were much higher.
The equipment had improved by the time that we went the second time round. So off I went, but I had a brief with the Admiral before I left, and a brief from the staff before I left, and it was quite clear that this was a very different situation from that in 1958.
I was a young frigate captain. I had a captain at sea senior to me, a four-stripe captain, and so he told me what to do, and the politics was quite a long way from my life. And there was, of course, an admiral above him, and then there was the Ministry of Defence and the politicians above that. So we were a long way down the ladder. And as far as politics were concerned, we had a very clear set of rules of engagement which told us what we could and couldn't do.
We always, right from the beginning of our patrols, were warned, and very properly, that we were going up to deal with a group of expert seamen who'd been used to operating in rough conditions, and we had to be extremely careful that here was somebody who was actually much better at doing this sort of thing and in a better ship than we were.
Used to try and match them, and always try to have a collision on the port side, so that in international law we would be seen as being in the right, because international law says that ships approaching on the port side give way. So if you have a collision, the ship on the port side is the one that's at fault.
Varðan við kæmist að landinu, síldast að þannig að ég gat aldrei byggt af landinu, og þá var eitt sem þannig að ég verða við rest, þá var ég bara að beygja á þá hef ég kert á fyrir það sjálf því viljandi, og þá komst ég burtu, en það ger ég viljandi.
And I was given a beat, if you like, a patrol line, and went up and down that waiting for something to happen. And I began to think, oh dear, this is going to be boring. And then suddenly, Tyr came out of the undergrowth and started heading towards the defended area. So the next frigate, Tartar, and I went off together to intercept the Tyr, who was obviously coming towards the trawlers.
En þeir voru mjög limpnari að koma okkur í þá aðstöðu þegar þeir fóru utan í okkur, að þeir væri í rétti svona myndrænt séð en En samkvæmt siglingareglum þá vildu við meina að þeir væru í órétti vegna þess að þeir höfðu siglt okkur uppi. Það stendur þar einhvers staðar að skip sem siglir annað uppi það var að víkja fyrir því að sjá til þess að það lendi ekki í klemmu við það. Og það gerði, þeir kom alltaf aftan frá og sigldu fram með okkur.
Here, this is Brighton. I intend to hold my lawful course. I intend to hold my lawful course. Clear the area away from the fishing fleet. Clear the area away from fishing fleet. Clear Brighton. Over.
Og það má kannski segja að hann vægir sem viti hefur meira en maður kunni ekki alltaf við að láta beigjast fyrir þeim og við þetta þá hélt bara stefn og hraða óbreyttin sem maður ber samkvæmt siglingarlögum og þá var það afrekstur. Svo stendur nú líka í þeim að ég fór það afrekstur í lengstu lög. Það svona, maður geti ekki munað allt í einu.
There was a rather buccaneering spirit on board. The sailors could see that we were mixing it with the gunboats to protect the trawlers. It was very obvious what was going on. So they thought it was good fun. And they went round the ship saying, "Go on, sir, bash into them," and all this sort of thing. And if I'd taken their advice, it would have been disastrous. So we did exactly actually what our rules said, because it was the most